Do you agree that a prosecutor intending to rely on expert evidence in criminal proceedings was under the following duties? Firstly, to satisfy themselves as to the expert's relevant qualifications and expertise.
You're going to read the whole thing, or are you?
Well, I could read out 6 things, and then you'd have to remember them and say which of them you agreed and which you didn't. It might be best if I did them one by one. So that's the first one.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
So we're going to jump back into Jarnail Singh's testimony to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and I think the best way to describe it is Jason Beer is giving him a legal lesson on what an expert witness is. And interestingly, compared to the previous day, he is taking a long time to answer. So you wonder whether he's been told to restrict what he's saying, shall we say, because it's not looking great. Then goes on to discuss Gareth Jenkins, who was the only person in the world who could answer the questions he had about Horizon because it was so specialist, but apparently wasn't actually an expert in the system. Let's see what he has to say and jump into the inquiry.
Can I ask you some questions about the duties of a prosecutor in relation to an expert witness? Do you agree that a prosecutor intending to rely on expert evidence in criminal proceedings was under the following duties? Firstly, to satisfy themselves as to the expert's relevant qualifications and expertise.
I mean, the answer to that's got to be yes, surely, otherwise not an expert witness.
Sorry, you finished. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Are you going to read I think you're going to read the whole thing, or are you?
Well, I could read out 6 things, and then you'd have to remember them and say which of them you agreed and which you didn't. It might be best if I did them one by one.
One by. Sorry. Yes.
So that's the first one.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
Do you agree that a prosecutor was under a duty, if they intended to rely on expert evidence, to satisfy themselves as to the expert's relevant qualifications and experience?
Yes. Yes.
Secondly, a prosecutor was required to satisfy themselves that the expert had been appropriately instructed, including by the provision of a written and detailed letter or email of instruction or terms of reference.
Yes. Yes.
Thirdly, the prosecutor was under a duty to provide the expert within those instructions as to what it is that his or her opinion was sought about, and should set out the issues or questions that they were expecting the expert to answer.
Generally, yes.
Surely that's got to be a yes. Generally? What's general about it? They need to know what they're going to be asked or what you're expecting them to answer, surely.
Fourthly, they were under a duty to provide explicit guidance as to what the expert was being asked to do and what material they were being asked to consider in order to undertake that task.
Yes. Yes.
Fifthly, a prosecutor was under a duty to set out the material upon which reliance had been placed in the prosecution and which of that material may be relevant to the questions which the expert was being expected to answer.
Yes.
And sixthly, a prosecutor was under a duty to inform the expert as to the expert's relevant duties.
Yes.
Right, so he's agreed with all of that now. So is that what he actually did in his role as a prosecutor?
Would you agree that even those experts who were trained, accustomed, and made their living by giving expert evidence, a prosecutor had to make the expert sure that they understood what the expert's duties and obligations were?
I've just noticed he's been very careful today and taking a long time to start his responses, isn't he? I wonder whether there's been a conversation with his solicitor overnight compared to the previous day's worth of testimony where they're saying really think long and hard about how you answer.
Yes. Yes.
Would you agree that there was a duty on a prosecutor to satisfy themselves that the expert had understood that they owed duties to the court and that in their work and their report they had complied with their duties to the court?
Yes. Yes. Yes, of course.
Would you agree that a prosecutor at all relevant times was under a duty to satisfy themselves that any material or literature of which the prosecutor was aware and which might undermine the expert's opinion was reviewed by the prosecution and, if relevant, disclosed to the expert?
Yes.
Because that would stop them looking silly, wouldn't it, if they didn't have a full picture and then they were asked to testify on something in court?
And would you agree that these duties needed to be satisfied in order that the prosecutor could be satisfied that the expert evidence was admissible in court, i.e. these were conditions of admissibility rather than just written requirements that it was nice to achieve?
Yes. Yes.
So these went to admissibility?
Yes. I agree.
Did you, in your work, have all of those duties in mind when you were advising on files and acting as a prosecutor?
Well, again, the answer here has got to be yes. You're saying you understand all that, so surely you're going to say that you considered those. Or is he trying to think ahead, I think, which might count for the long pauses? Is he trying to think ahead of where Jason Beer's trying to go with this?
I'm trying to think. I don't, apart from one case, which again, I've never instructed an expert in any of my cases.
In the
post office.
In the post office, you never instructed an expert?
No.
Never relied on expert evidence?
No.
Including in Seema Misra's case?
Well, that again, I think you've seen my witness statement.
You say you didn't treat him as an expert. It was the court that did it.
No, I'm not saying anything. All I said was that he came as the only person who could assist with the workings and operation of the Horizon system. And I think as the matter progressed, it became apparent that the only way the defense experts can function or able to do his duties or assist the court was with the assistance of the guy who was assistant of the Fujitsu employee who knew the system very well, because it's a very, very specialist system. So you need a special knowledge. You can't just have anybody come in to be able to understand it and then actually assist the court.
Well, that's true, but so he's trying to say it's a very specialist system. We need somebody who knew what they were talking about, but I didn't consider them an expert. The court kind of said they were an expert. Well, the courts generally don't determine who's an expert and who's not, just in the same way they don't determine what witnesses you call. I mean, if he's trying to go along that line, that sounds more absurd than some of the things that have previously been said.
We're going to come back to that big topic in a moment, whether you treated Mr. Jenkins as an expert,
Yes, of course.
or not.
Yeah. Yes.